Hey guys.
What up, what
How
up?
are you all doing?
Very, very good. How about yourself?
I'm all right, yeah. I just got back from Thailand last night, so I'm a little
yeah?
bit like, whoa. I was on the beach. Now I'm like in WonderCon, but
I
it's
have a
great.
bunch of mics in your face.
Yeah, it's great.
How did you avoid the jet lag?
I didn't. Coffee. I'm still a little bit jet lagged.
So I'm going to jump in right here.
Yeah.
So you portray one of, if not the only, male bisexual superhero on TV. What's that like for you, and what's it like knowing how important that is to a lot of people?
I think it's great to have that kind of diversity, in on television, and But what's so great is the character himself, and I think that, with John, what's great about him is, he'll take it either way. It's not like he is one thing. He'll go with the moment on whatever that is, and I think staying true to that part of the character in the comics books has been great, and it's been an interesting thing to explore so far on Legends of Tomorrow.
Yeah, and I know that they haven't really specifically come out and said, oh, he identifies this way. Does he have a label for himself, or does he not do
No,
that?
I don't think he has a label at all. I think for him it's like, I like this, and now I like that, and I like this, and for him it's whatever works in the moment.
Sure.
Yeah.
What did you think of the episodes you saw? What was your favorite part about them?
Of these?
Yeah, the ones
I really liked. I thought it was quite gory. I thought it was really quite gory, and I was like, shit, this is like, it's not for kids, which is great. But I think it's a really character-driven piece. And you get the relationship between John and Chaz, and then also the Newcastle stuff as well. And it's a great comic anyway, all his engines. And I think that when I read the script, he's done such a great job in it. And I'm excited to see what you guys think of the later episodes when it gets even more personal for John. And I think that was the one thing that I really enjoyed about it. Is it's a proper John Constantine kind of story.
And then how did you react to hearing that they were doing an animated series?
Well, what was funny is I was actually in Thailand, Thailand. I was in Thailand at the time on holiday, and David Goyer emailed me and said, "Look, we're going to be doing this. Will you please do it?" And I was like, "I'm in straight away," because I love the character, and to get to play him in any different medium is a great thing, And you can do so much with animation that you can't do on the live show. So that was a real treat as well.
Now that you're really, really deep in the character, which comic storyline are you looking to jump into at some point?
Oh, there's so many, man. I've just started reading them again, and I think I read about 150 when I was originally doing the show, and then I stopped, and I've just picked up Hellblazer Rebirth, so I'm going to read that, and then I think I'm going to go back again and just brush up on some of the others. The one that always sticks with me is the first one I ever read is Dangerous Habits. And then the other one that I was really interested in when we were shooting Constantine the show was Family Man, because I think it's really interesting seeing John interact with a human being, the dark side of humanity. I think he can be almost fine with demons, but then it comes to human beings and it's slightly more difficult. So it would have been interesting to explore in the live action. Also, I think that it could help with the budget. Do you know what I mean? Because you don't have to do all these explosions and spells and stuff. But there's so many great comics, and I'm looking forward to getting in and reading them again,
Considering your character can be a bit unlikable, what traits do you connect to the most as like an actor? And what are the most important aspects of the character to you?
I think that he can be funny, and he has that wit and that charm, but it has to be juxtapositioned with the darkness, with the torment of his soul. Otherwise, it just becomes cheesy. You really need that. It needs to be rooted in that, and that's really important for me. The most fun bit about it is the little quips and one-liners, and some of the writers, for City of Demons and Constantine the show, all the writers across the board, they really kind of get his cadence and those little one-liners that where he just flicks his middle finger up to the devil and says, "Piss off," That's a really important part of the character, his kind of nonchalant kind of attitude towards people.
You mentioned this in the panel. I'd love for you to expand on it. that you said, like, you know, after the one season show, you sort of like put the character to bed. Now you like came back for Arrow, maybe put it to bed again. Then you come back for Legends and this animated movie. What's that like for you to have to keep picking up the character and now also to know that he's so beloved, even though it seems like it's just start and stop?
Yeah, it's great to be able to kind of pick the character up again. What was interesting is the most difficult kind of point of entry to coming back to him was doing Legends, because I had thought it was done. And I had just finished doing a play in London, and I was doing a really thick Yorkshire accent in this play, which was set in pre-industrial Britain, and I was going straight from that to Legends of Tomorrow. And I kept on playing, when I was working on it, I kept on doing John in the Yorkshire accent. I was like, this is wrong, man. Like, what the frick is he? Like, you know, because I don't use my own accent quite for John. It's a mix. He's got a little bit of a northern accent in there, you know, it's a bit of a nod to where he's from and stuff. And Wales is actually really close to Liverpool, so there's some vowel sounds that are the same, but it's not my accent that I use. But there was this moment when I was like, this is wrong. Like, this doesn't feel like John. So I went back and I watched the TV show and started to read all the old comics and look at my old notes that I had made. And after a while, it did start to come back, you know. But what was funny as well is I watched the TV show and I'm like, what are you doing with that walk? I mean, where did that walk come from? Because, like, I mean, he struts, man. He, like, really struts. And I was like, fucking hell, man, what were you doing? And I was just, like, laughing. But then once I started to get back into the character, you know, I really did feel that, you know, that's needed. He is that kind of cocky guy, you know, and that's so different from me, you know, but it's really fun to play.
He's had a bit of a trouble kind of like finding a home on television.
Yeah.
I guess on television. Do you think he's like finally found his place on Legends, or do you think kind of the animation will kind of go farther or resonate more with man?
I'm not sure, you know, it'll be interesting to see. I think that the animation is great because it is a Constantine story, and fans will really be able to enjoy that as a standalone thing, and also the fans of the Hellblazer comics will have fun, I think, seeing one of the original comics adapted to the animation. And what's great is seeing, you know, doing him on Legends. I mean, how's he going to interact with those guys? What kind of dynamic is it going to bring to him being on that ship, you know? He doesn't really work well with the team, you know? So those are the interesting things to see kind of how he develops in that world as well. And for me, it's all interesting, and I just hope that, you know, the fans will enjoy him in these different mediums as well. And my job now is to go back to the comics and kind of see how much more I can glean and gather from what I haven't read, and reread some of the stuff that I had read, you know, and kind of find some more interesting things to bring to it and play with it. Yeah.
And then I guess you go, man.
Would you like to actually see Dangerous Habits play out?
Fuck yeah, man.
Yeah?
Pardon my language, but yeah, that's like my favorite one
Same.
at the moment. It's just like, it's great, you know. I really, my hope was that we would get there with a live action show, you know. One thing I've learned from playing this character is never say never at all, because every time I thought it's been dead, they pulled me back in. So, you know, hopefully one day we'll get there, you know, even if it's someone else playing the part down the line. I would love to see this character, you know, whether it be in animation or in live action, play that storyline out, because it's one of my favorites.
All right, well, that's it, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers,
Thank you.
guys.
And,
Thanks.
and my good sir, thank you so much for playing a bi hero. It means a lot to me. as a
Oh
bi
man, no, it's
So thank
great,
you,
man. My pleasure.
Have a good one, man.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
Oh. Awesome.
Oh, Sea of Faces.
Yes, very good question.
That's right, Constantine, Sea of Faces. It's a good title.
Hey, so let's just start it off with, how do you go about nailing the tone of a Constantine story? Because I mean, like, obviously he's been in all these shows, like Legends was a little more comedic, and now this movie is very, very dark. How do you go about nailing the right tone?
You know, I wrote the character. I wrote the Justice League Dark comic book for quite a while, and you sort of absorb these characters under your skin. And then we adapted this from the graphic novel, and that brought another little texture there. And you just, I don't think, I write very intuitively, so I don't really think about these things. I just sort of find the characters, almost like acting, and then they kind of speak through you as you write.
How do you properly listen to those characters? Like, how do you make sure that you're hearing the right things, and then sometimes you have to like modify the things that you hear, or
Not with this. It didn't. You know, if you're creating a new character, it's a different thing. You're trying to find that voice. But Constantine is a pretty established character. I'd written him long enough that I really knew his voice, or at least my version of his voice. You know, so it was pretty easy.
So you guys actually wrapped up the panel. Do you have any highlights from that for people such as me who weren't able to attend?
Oh, well, the real highlight for me was actually to get to see this thing on a gigantic screen. And, you know, this is one of the, I've done a lot of animation over the years. This is one of the best animated projects I have ever worked on from start to finish, every step of the way. And so to see it in its final form and to see how it turned out, which is pretty fantastic, I was thrilled. Yeah.
Was there anything that they didn't allow you to do in terms of violence, graphic?
No, in fact, you know, what happens is I write a scene a certain way, and it's, you know, like the scene in the club where the demon shows up, and I think I'm pushing it to the edge, and then the animators get a hold of it, and it's like 100 times bloodier and gorier than anything I ever imagined when I was writing it. So no one restricted me with anything on this script. I was really, really free, and as I said on the panel, all the notes that I got, which, you know, when you're a writer, the notes are sometimes a horrifying part of the process. The notes were all phenomenal because the notes were really all about character, and that's what I love, is digging into the characters. And it's a really important story for Constantine. It's a very deep emotional journey that he ends up going on, as we see by the end of this. So the whole process was just great.
Any stories you'd like to go into with Constantine as the series moves forward? Possibly Dangerous Habits?
You know, if we get to do another one, I would like to see him go and rescue Astra.
Ooh.
You know, that's a story I would love to tell. Yeah.
That could be fun.
You've written the character in Justice League Dark, but you haven't written like a full like Hellblazer series before.
Right.
If you got the chance to do like a mini series, what would the basic plot be, and what characters would like have to be in there?
Oh, you know, it's really hard to say if you haven't been given an assignment. You know, what would I do? I would love a chance to write the comic book or do a graphic novel or something like that. I'd probably like to do something original. Although one thing I really connected with in the course of the story was that connection and relationship between John and Chaz, which is fantastic. It's sort of the Lennon and McCartney of the occult, you know.
when you've been writing a character, you know, you've written a lot of stories with Constantine. How do you find like the new angle after you've told like the first couple stories that come to your brain? Like,
you know, I have written, you know, Batman and Superman and Spider-Man and all these characters, and that's the constant challenge. They've been around for 8,000 years at this point.
Yeah.
And on one level, you're limited to a certain degree in how far you can go, say, in this direction. But you're never limited in how far you can drill into their psyche. Mm-hmm. And there's always some new corner of their emotions, of their psychological makeup that you can always find. And that, to me, is always the core of a great story. It has to come from the character out. It's nice to have great plot mechanics happening, but it really has to be a story that matters to the character and is kind of revealing about the character. Yeah.
So do you feel an obligation to kind of conform to how the audience knows the characters like Batman and Constantine, or do you still feel like you have enough creative control to like be satisfied by your own kind
You
of
have to do both simultaneously. You really do. You have to respect the tradition and the history of the character, and you can't break the essence of the character. What you have to do is find new places to shine a light that people haven't seen that aspect yet, but it still has to be true. So you can't suddenly turn Batman or Constantine into something they're not. And your editor or your producer would never allow you to do it anyway. But you can really find new wrinkles in those characters, or else there's no point in writing them. If you're just writing it the way it's always been, you know, it's pointless and boring.
Sorry. What other DC characters do you want to throw against Constantine if you get the chance beyond the movie?
Oh, beyond this? Well, you know, someone asked the question about Zatanna, and I think it would be great to bring Zatanna in and play with that romance. That's the first one that comes to mind. There's a great Kirby character called the Demon, who is another one of the DC's great supernatural characters who I would love to bring in. And I'm not saying there's going to be another one, but in the back of my brain, the next story is kind of churning around, even though there isn't one yet, just in case, and the Demon is in there bouncing around, so I would love to bring that character in.
Was there anything in the City of Demons comic that you like really wanted to be in the final product but didn't get to make it?
No, we got to use a lot of great stuff from that story. A lot of the really weirdest, goriest stuff in this came right out of the ground. This Beirul with his swimming pool full of decomposing dead bodies, you know. I don't think I could have ever come up with that one, you know. So, you know, the graphic novel was a fantastic foundation for this, and then we built out from there and added a lot of elements, both in terms of character and plot, that weren't in the graphic novel. So if someone's a fan of the graphic novel, they're going to get a lot of the big beats that they know and love from that story, and they're also going to get a lot of stuff that they never saw or knew before, which is, I think, what you want to do with an adaptation like this.
What's it like? Because Constantine is one of the very few male bisexual heroes in comics and now on TV as well.
Right.
What's it like writing that, and do you keep that in your mind when you're writing him?
Well, it's an essence of who he is. Yeah, we didn't get to really explore that in this story, but I would hope if we do another one, we could explore that a little bit more. Yeah.
What would you like to explore about that in terms of like his psyche or?
It's just who we were talking, you know, before, because it's a character in City of Demons called Nightmare Nurse, who's sort of a magical nurse. She's there if there's a problem with someone physically caused by the occult or by the supernatural. And they have, the way I established in the comics is they have a sexual history.
Yeah.
But we also discovered that beneath her human skin is a demonic form, which means that Constantine's been having sex with a demon. So we decided he's not bisexual, he's omnisexual. You know what I mean? If it has two legs, he might have sex with it. That's my opinion anyway. Matt might have a different opinion.
Sort of like the Jack Harkness of the DC universe.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Right, and with Jack Harkness, it flows very naturally. It's not like you don't have to hit it on the head and go, look at this, you know? It's just who the character is.
Happens naturally.
Yeah.
And you were talking earlier about, you know, sort of like having character but also having cool plot moves. Do you try to make sure that the plot moves, how do you make sure that the plot moves tie into like the theme of the overall story and the character stuff?
That's the essence of writing. You just hit it right there. You know, it's like you have three threads, because hopefully you have a theme, you know? Although a lot of times you have a theme and you don't really discover your theme until you're deep in the story, you know what I mean? You can't necessarily sit down and say, here's my theme, and I'll make everything fit with it, because you can't write that way. But you want a really nice plot engine moving forward, but you want everything to matter. Everything that happens has to matter to that character. A lot of superhero movies, you get to the third act and it's basically, we're going to blow things up and people are going to punch each other and the movie's over. And the movies that really work for me are the ones when you get to that third act, that whatever's going on outwardly with the violence and the buildings exploding and everything else hinges on character, that the characters are changing and growing and learning in that moment. So all those elements have to come together to make a great story.
And what are some good example of that for you that you've
You know, one of my favorite was in X-Men First Class. If you remember the third act of that movie, it was all about that moment when Magneto turned. Everything that happened in the action was really about pushing his character to that place where he became something different than what he was before. And I thought they did a brilliant job with that one. It's one of my favorites.
Is there anything from the Constantine TV series that you'd like to revisit at some point?
I shouldn't admit this. I didn't see them all. I saw a bunch of them. You know what I mean? I saw a bunch of them and I enjoyed them. But I am not so well versed in the live action show that I can say, oh, I'd like to bring back this, that, or the other thing. Actually, I think I watched a whole bunch of them. But there's so much material in the comics, you know? And then it's also, the character is so interesting and the worlds he inhabits are so interesting that also would be nice to just go out and do new original stories, you know, and without having everything, because it's an adaptation, doesn't have to call back to something that pre-exists, you know? It's nice to create new and original material as well.
When you get to writing a character like Constantine, especially when you were starting to write him in the comic, do you go back and you have to read every single comic, or do you get a summation, or what do you do?
You know, when I first started in comics, if I got an assignment for like, okay, you're going to write Aquaman, which was one of my earliest things, like, all right, I got to go buy 500 back issues of Aquaman and read it. I don't do that anymore. You want to just get the essence. You want to, you know, you read enough material and that you get the big beats and the essence of who that character is. For me, I think when I started, it was just an excuse to buy more comics, you know what I mean? Which is it's a great thing about this job. I sometimes say, oh, I get paid to like watch cartoons and write and read comic books.
Hey.
It's a great, if I could tell my 12-year-old self that this is what I do, he would faint, you know?
Yeah.
So you have to know enough. You can't just go in blind and make stuff up, you know? So you have to be grounded and read enough backstory that you know. But I don't go and read everything anymore.
Yeah, so it's not about being like making sure that one little thing doesn't contradict in like an issue like 20 years ago.
No, and
or
hopefully
anything.
in comics, that's what your editor is there for, you know, and I know a lot of hardcore comic book people when they get into the business, and I was the same way in the beginning, you get obsessed with like, that thing that happened between panel 2 and 3 in that issue 7 years ago, I want to write a story about that, you know, and then eventually you sort of drop that and you just, it's about following the story. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah, thanks
Thank
guys.
you so much, my good sir.
Appreciate it.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Sir.
You said good.
Just make sure your face is. Oh, nope.
Nope. What's going on?
Is new.
It's pretty dope. So let's
Oh,
just
Get right into it.
All right. We're gonna get right into it. So,
All right.
what were some of the biggest challenges in making this movie a reality?
Having him smoke.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, I mean, the eviscerating, no problem. The sexy nurse costume, no problem. The pulling somebody's spine out, no problem. But smoking, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, he never did it on the live action series.
yeah, I know, and they really tried to cut around it. But, it's grandfathered in. We tried to do the best we could with it to have it like I even saw in the footage, like it's in an ashtray. You see him stubbing it out. So it's smoking adjacent. But there are times where you see him smoke,
Yeah.
So, but I understand. Like I grew up with my father smoking. I smoked when I was young. It was like kind of imitable behavior. So I get it. I'm used to it in animation. There's a lot of rules, because when you do, this is particularly adult animation, but on the kids side, we used to have a rule about defenestration that, like you never saw characters getting punched and flying out a window, but they've relaxed that. So I don't know why I brought that up, but
On that, you tried to push for a lot of dark, mature content in City of Demons. And do you think that this, along with like Vixen and Ray and all the kind of straight to DVD stuff, is gonna like open up the doors for more like adult animation that's kind of serious? And
yeah, for sure. And I think that fans are wanting that a little bit. I think the maturity of it, the maturity of the writing, and it's not only in the there's blood and boobs and cursing and smoking. It's in the depth of the writing of the characters and how real their problems are and how hard it is for them to overcome whatever kind of problems. That's part of the adult nature of it as well. So we are doing more and more of that. I mean, this was a good example. The Ray, I don't know if you guys saw that Freedom Fighters in the Ray. That was a good example. That's like the Ray kind of struggling with his own kind of coming out to his family about his own sexuality and owning it. And that's a big theme. That's a big swing, So nobody could be happier about this opening up and having more kind of mature writing and more sophisticated writing. So
Okay, so you just came from the panel. What was the highlight for you?
asking Matt which way, like that one character, the nightmare nurse, what, because when I wanted working on this script, I was like, wait a minute, do you have sex with her as a nurse or as a creepy monster person thing?
How about both?
So yeah, how about both? Exactly. Whatever. I'm not judging anyone. But also, I wasn't there when Matt was recording. So, and then Matt has seen some of it, but not all of it. So watching him watch it was great because, animation is, we write it, we storyboard it, we do the animatic, and then we ship it. And then I don't see it for 8 months. And when it comes back, and the whole time you're like, oh. So we work with these studios a lot, so we know it's going to be good. But then when it finally comes back, it's like it comes to life. So that's great. And watching him see it, I can see it through his eyes for the first time again, which is great.
Good. Yeah,
Yeah.
the reception seems amazing.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, people love this character. They love the
Why do you
character.
think people love this character so much?
I think because, Constantine presents as a person that is cynical, is jaded, isn't invested, is kind of removed, but then you really know that he is not. He's totally invested. There's real good in him. And he's an anti-hero for that reason, and people love an anti-hero. It's why people love Batman. It's why, those characters really resonate, I think. And Constantine, and he has to walk even, I think, a more narrow path because his protagonists and antagonists, are true villains and demons. So, it's like, I think why Batman and the Joker too. It's like, because he is, it's light and dark.
Yeah.
And he's light-ish, which is interesting, but fighting total dark,
Yeah.
which I think is,
I think that
really
pushes like the
interesting.
dark even darker to
Yes,
make it. Yeah.
exactly.
Speaking of you were talking about the characters resonating. Are there any other characters you're like looking forward to, or you want to put any more CW series? Or
Yes, we're talking with CW and with DC now about what might be, the same kind of Vixen, Ray, Constantine thing moving forward. But, I love that supernatural corner of the DCU. I loved working on Justice League Dark. Dr. Fate is a huge character for me. I've always loved Dr. Fate. So yeah, Spectre, like all those characters, things from the Swamp Thing kind of universe, so I love that.
Beyond this story, what's your dream Constantine story to adapt into animation?
Oh boy. I would love to go back and start with the introduction of the character. I love that early Swamp Thing run. I love that. I love how Swamp Thing was handled. I love how Constantine, because that was more of Hellblazery, you know, in the early kind of introduction. So I think I would lean into that probably.
And then, so you mentioned about, like, we were talking a little bit about, like, you know, animation for an older audience, and there's still a bit of a stigma in the industry about, like, oh, animation's, like, much more for kids.
Mm-hmm.
So what's it like for you, especially in your position, to be able to really go all out and have, like, a pool of bodies and stuff?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's also great because, you know, it's just telling bigger stories, you know, and, you know, if you look to other parts of the world, Europe, Asia, like, animation is a whole different experience there. It's only really in the States that it's, you know, kind of just the backwater for kids a little bit. In the last 20 years, it's kind of with Adult Swim and with Netflix and with the straight-to-DVD market, it's kind of exploded a little bit, so that's great. And I know everybody we work with on the creative side, and again, animation is a wildly collaborative effort, so there's hundreds of people like doing storyboards and animatics and doing props and layout and character design and all of it. But, you know, once the material gets a little more adult and a little more resonant, then you get to flex muscles that you don't really get to do, you know, on normal kind of broadcast television animation. So,
Is there any original ideas that you'd like to see come to CWC?
original animated ideas?
Yeah, not specifically DC.
Yeah, we have a few things we're thinking of, you know. It's really depending on what the audience, the appetite of the audience there, you know. But we have, I also help run a group called Blue Ribbon Content inside Warner Brothers Television, and Blue Ribbon does a lot of things for CWC on the live action side. So, you know, on one hand, we're doing this original content on the live action side, and then I also work at Warner Brothers Animation, so then I put on my other hat and do this other kind of stuff for CWC, and it's been great. And because it's kind of a digital-first platform, we can take a lot more chances, which is great.
Hey, folks, I'm sorry I have to pull him, but you'll be getting Matt in just a couple minutes.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
so much.
Thank you. Sure.